denied any involvement in the past week's independence demonstrations, but the protests and calls for an Olympic boycott are gaining strength around the world. CTV's South Asian Bureau Chief Paul Workman reports.
As China continues to tighten its grip on the Tibetan population, it has done all it can to demonize their spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. They now accuse him of directly trying to sabotage Beijing's Olympic spectacle by promoting violence. A terrorist, they say, holding the games hostage. In New Delhi, the Tibetan leader, ever composed, said essentially, that's absolutely wrong.
I always support Olympic should take place in China. Not like that.
All weekend, the Dalai Lama's supporters gathered around their embattled leader. China's attack has been relentless. This was called a peace parade, but was really a solidarity march for the man they call His Holiness. There was a pro-Tibet rally in Delhi, as well as marches in other parts of the world. This sort of thing will likely continue right up to the start of the Olympic Games.
Paul Workman, CTV News, New Delhi. And many of those protests have been held in Canadian cities, and one of the largest was held right here on the streets of Toronto. CTV's Janice Golding has the details.
Stop the killing in Tibet! Their voices were hoarse with passion, but their message was clear.
Shame on China!
Violence marching! Tibetans and their supporters took over the downtown core for a 3.5-hour protest against the ongoing violence in Tibet.
What's going on in Tibet is brutal and it's inhumane.
It's very sad. It's very sad.
I'm privileged. I'm Canadian Tibetan. I'm able to speak my mind and voice my opinion and not be detained or beaten up for it.
The latest Tibetan rebellion against Chinese rule erupted March the 10th when hundreds of Buddhist monks and nuns staged a march which ended in scores of arrests. In response, the protests escalated, spreading throughout the region, and the Chinese sent in thousands of troops. Many Tibetans have since been killed, and today, in a symbolic gesture against the brutality, protesters, many of them so emotional they were moved to tears, held a die-in on the busy Bathurst Queen corridor.
While Beijing claims about 20 people have died in the violent protests, the Dalai Lama's government in exile says that number is closer to 100. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is for certain, this is a public relations nightmare for the Chinese government as it gears up for the 2008 Olympics. There have been calls for the Canadian government and others to boycott the Olympic opening ceremonies and demands the Olympic torch relay route not pass through Tibet.
When the torch passes through Tibet, then it will actually exacerbate the situation inside Tibet because a lot of Tibetans feel a lot of resentment.
Now, the GTA's Tibetan community says this is not going to be the end of it. Starting this Tuesday, they're going to be holding hunger protests outside the Chinese consulate. And on March 31st, they say they are going to be holding another protest just like this one to join with other international groups protesting the situation in Tibet. Janice Golding, CTV News.
A Canadian